There is a maritime legend that says the deadliest seas are the violent ones, the storms that turn the sky black, and the waves into mountains. But history tells us that is a lie. The deadliest sea is a mirror, calm, flat, and terrifyingly silent. In December of 1987, the ocean did not just drown a city, it burned it. They called her the Doña Paz. She was a holiday ship, a floating bridge meant to bring thousands of families home for Christmas. On the surface, she was a vessel of joy and reunion. But beneath the white paint and the festive lights, she was a phantom. She was carrying a secret population, thousands of souls who did not exist on any passenger list, sailing toward a collision that would turn the ocean into a floor of fire. The official records say 1,000 people died that night. The ghosts say 4,000. It remains the deadliest peacetime disaster in maritime history, worse than the Titanic, yet the world has largely scrubbed it from memory. Tonight, we are going to stop the clock. We are not just going to recount a tragedy, we are going to dissect the machine that allowed it to happen. We will walk the crowded decks, we will examine the broken systems, and we will face the silence that followed the scream. I invite you to dim the lights, settle into your chair, and join me as we descend into the dark story of the ship that never arrived. Welcome to the investigation. There is a sound that the human ear is not designed to process. Evolution has tuned us to hear the snapping of a twig, the roar of a predator, the cry of a child, signals meant to trigger immediate, singular action. Fight, flight, protect. We are wired for intimate dangers. We are not wired for the sound of a city dying all at once. When Maurice Farrell closes his eyes, he does not see the fire first. The memory is not visual. It does not begin with the color of burning oil, or the stark, terrifying brightness that turned midnight into noon. It begins with the acoustic impossible. It begins with a noise so dense, so layered, and so total that it became a physical pressure against his eardrums. Imagine being adrift in the absolute blackness of the ocean. The water is warm, slick with oil, and the air above you is scorching hot. You are floating in a void where the horizon has been erased by smoke. And in that void, you are the audience to a choir of 4,000 voices, raised in unison, not in song, but in the final realization of their own end. Maurice Farrell remembers the texture of that sound. He remembers how it didn't sound like people anymore. It sounded like the earth itself was tearing open. It was a mechanical grinding, a screeching of metal overlaid with a human frequency that rose and fell in terrifying waves. He remembers the way the sound traveled across the water. Water is a terrifying conductor of sound. It carries noise faster and clearer than air. In the calm of the Tabla Strait, the screams didn't dissipate. They accumulated. They stacked on top of one another until they formed a wall of noise that hit him in the chest. He was a young man then. He had a life of simple ambitions, of family connections, of looking forward to the holidays. But in the water, bobbing amidst the debris of what was once a grand vessel, he was stripped of everything but his sense of hearing. He listened as the voices changed. He listened as the panic shifted into agony, and then, most hauntingly, he listened as the choir began to thin. The volume dropped. Not because rescue had arrived, not because the danger had passed, but because the singers were leaving. One by one, hundred by hundred, the voices were extinguished. The silence that followed was not peaceful. It was heavy. It was the loudest silence in the history of the maritime world. To understand how a man ends up floating in oil, listening to the death of thousands, we cannot start with the fire. The fire is the end of the story. The fire is the executioner. To understand the tragedy of the Doña Paz, we have to go back to the silence before the scream. We have to go back to the systems, the papers, the handshakes, and the quiet, desperate need of a nation trying to get home for Christmas. It begins with the heat. December in the Philippines is not a winter month. It is a humid, sticky season where the air hangs heavy with the scent of diesel and dust. It is 1987. The country is in a state of transition, vibrating with the energy of a people constantly on the move. And nowhere is this movement more frantic, more desperate, than at the darker edges of the Manila North Harbor. The calendar reads late December. The date on the wall of the ticket office is approaching the 24th. In the Philippines, Christmas is not merely a holiday, it is a gravitational event. It pulls families together across islands, across straits, across vast stretches of blue water. It is a biological imperative. You go home. No matter the cost, no matter the distance, no matter the danger. You go home. The piers are a riot of color and noise. If you were to stand on the concrete dock in those days, looking down at the swirling mass of humanity, you would see a tapestry of desperation. Thousands of people. They are carrying pasalubong, gifts for the family back in the province. They are carrying boxes tied with rough twine, crates of apples, sacks of rice, plastic bags filled with clothes. They are carrying the weight of a year's worth of labor, trying to bring the fruit of that labor back to the soil that grew them. The heat rises from the concrete. Children are crying, their faces streaked with sweat and grime. Vendors weave through the crowd selling water in plastic bags, selling boiled eggs, selling cigarettes. The air is thick with the exhaust of jeepneys and the salt spray of the bay. But underneath the chaotic energy, there is a singular driving anxiety. Everyone needs a ticket, and there are no tickets left. The official manifest is a polite fiction. It is a piece of paper that says, quite reasonably, that the ship can hold 1,518 souls. It is a bureaucratic number, calculated by engineers and safety inspectors in clean, air-conditioned rooms. But down here, on the hot asphalt, the number is meaningless. The crowd does not care about capacity ratings. The crowd cares about the calendar. If they do not get on this ship, they miss Christmas. If they miss Christmas, they fail their families. And so the system begins to bend. It begins to warp under the pressure of human need. This is where the tragedy starts, not with a collision, but with a transaction. A quiet exchange of pesos for passage, a nod at the gangplank, a name left off a list. In the days leading up to the departure, the Doña Paz sits at the dock like a bloated queen. She is a ferry, a workhorse of the Sulpicio lines. She is not a new ship. Like many vessels plying the waters of the archipelago, she has a past life. She was born in Japan years ago, designed for different waters, different standards. She was named the Himayuri Maru then. She was sleek, efficient, a product of Japanese industrial pride. But ships, like people, age. They grow heavy. They are sold, renamed, refitted. By 1987, she has been modified to maximize profit. Her lines are still strong, her hull is still steel, but she is tired. She has been running this route back and forth, a shuttle loom weaving the islands together. She's a massive object looming over the pier. Her white paint is scuffed in places, stained with the weeping rust that plagues all ocean-going vessels. To the eyes of the waiting crowd, she is not a machine. She is a savior. She is the only bridge across the Visayan Sea. The people looking up at her hull see salvation. They do not see the cracks in the system. They do not see that the life vest lockers are sometimes stuck, painted shut by years of maintenance crews who favored aesthetics over function. They do not see that the radio equipment on the bridge is finicky, an old temperamental beast that requires just the right touch. They do not see that the officers who will command her are just as tired as the ship itself. They only see the gangplank, and they surge toward it. The process of boarding the Doña Paz on this specific voyage is a study in fluid dynamics. The vessel fills up. The cabins, the first-class accommodations with their thin mattresses and air conditioning, are taken first. Then the second class, the large dormitory rooms with rows of bunk beds. Then the third class, the open-air decks where cots are lined up like hospital beds in a war zone. But the people keep coming. The official count stops. The ledger is closed. But the gangplank remains down. The extras begin to board. These are the ghosts of the Doña Paz. The people who will buy tickets on board, or pay a crew member directly, or simply squeeze into a space so small that no ticket collector could find them. They fill the corridors. They lay out newspapers and woven mats on the steel floors of the hallways. They sit on the stairs, curling their legs beneath them to let others pass. They occupy the spaces between the spaces. They fill the mess hall, sleeping under the tables. They spill out onto the open decks, finding shelter behind winches and ventilation ducts. By the time the sun begins to dip lower, casting long, orange shadows across the Manila skyline, the Doña Paz is no longer just a ship. She is a floating city. She is carrying not 1,500 people, but perhaps 3,000, perhaps 4. Some estimates, whispered in the years that followed, suggest even more. The ship sits low in the water. If you were a sailor, a real deep-water sailor, you might have noticed the draft marks on the hull disappearing below the surface. You might have felt the sluggishness in the way she bobbed against the pier bumpers. She was heavy, groaning under the weight of the crowd and the cargo. But the mood on board is not one of danger. It is one of relief. The anxiety of the pier has evaporated. They are on board. They have made it. Children are running through the crowded aisles, dodging legs and luggage. The smell of adobo and rice wafts from portable stoves and the ship's galley. Men are playing cards, squatting in circles on the deck. Women are nursing babies. There is laughter. There is the distinct, vibrant, chaotic energy of a Filipino fiesta. It is a culture of assumption. We assume the ground will hold us. We assume the bridge will not collapse. We assume that because the ship is allowed to leave the port, it must be safe. We place our faith in the invisible hands of the system, the inspectors, the Coast Guard, the captain. We surrender our survival instinct to the machine, and the machine in this case is broken. The culture of maritime travel in the 1980s was one of make-do. It was a culture where safety regulations were viewed as suggestions, hurdles to be cleared with a smile and a handshake. Life jacket drills? They were a nuisance. Who wants to stand in the heat and put on a dusty, suffocating cork vest? Better to leave them in the lockers. Better to let the passengers rest. The crew, moving through the throngs of people, are navigating an obstacle course. They step over sleeping bodies. They squeeze past piles of luggage that block the fire exits. But they do not raise the alarm. This is normal. This is Christmas. To turn people away would be cruel. To delay the ship for a head count would be unthinkable. There is a fatalistic optimism at play, bahala na. Come what may, God will provide. The sea is vast, yes, but we have crossed it 1,000 times. Why should tonight be any different? Enter Maurice Farrell. He is one of the thousands. He is not a statistic yet. He is a man with a name, a history, and a destination. He walks up the gangplank, clutching his bag, feeling the vibration of the idling engines through the soles of his shoes. He is observant. He notices the density of the crowd. He sees that every square inch of the deck is claimed. To find a place to sleep, he has to negotiate. He has to find a small patch of floor, perhaps near a railing, perhaps near a stairwell. He lays out his territory. Maurice is not a sailor, but he knows the sea. He knows that a ship this crowded feels different. It moves differently. It doesn't roll with the snappy, cork-like buoyancy of an empty vessel. It wallows. It pushes through the water with a sullen, heavy determination. He settles in. He watches the skyline of Manila drift away as the ship finally casts off. The city is a band of glittering lights on the horizon, a galaxy of neon and incandescent bulbs. The sound of the city fades, replaced by the rhythmic thrumming of the diesel engines. Thrum, thrum, thrum. A heartbeat of steel and oil. He looks around at his fellow passengers. He sees a grandmother peeling an orange for her grandson. He sees a group of students sharing a bottle of rum, laughing softly so as not to wake the sleepers nearby. He sees the sheer vulnerability of it all. Soft flesh, loose clothing, unsecured luggage. If he had known what was waiting in the dark, he might have looked for a life vest then. He might have checked the exits. But the human mind rejects the possibility of total catastrophe. We cannot function if we constantly imagine the worst. So Maurice does what everyone else does. He trusts the ship. He trusts the captain. He closes his eyes and listens to the lullaby of the engine. The ship pushes out into the open water. The chaotic energy of departure settles into the rhythmic boredom of the voyage. The lights in the cabins flicker. The television in the mess hall blares a variety show, drawing a crowd of standing viewers. As the Doña moves further from the coast, the environment changes. The sea takes over. The weather that night is perfect. It is deceptively, cruelly perfect. The reports from the Weather Bureau indicate clear skies. The wind is negligible. The sea is calm, described by sailors as oil calm or glass. This calmness is a trap. When the sea is rough, people are alert. The crew is vigilant. The passengers are awake, gripping the railing, sick with nausea. In a storm, everyone knows they are in a fight against the elements. Adrenaline keeps the senses sharp. But when the sea is calm, the guard comes down. The gentle rocking of the ship acts as a sedative. It puts the watchers to sleep. The lookouts on the bridge gaze out at a horizon where the black sky meets the black water, and the lack of reference points creates a hypnotic trance. And there is another property of calm water that will become critical later that night: acoustics. On a rough sea, the sound of waves crashing masks everything. It swallows cries for help. It breaks up the noise of engines. But on a glass-smooth sea, the surface acts like a sounding board. It reflects noise. It allows sound to travel for miles undiminished. The Doña Paz is now cruising through the Tabla Strait. It is a known shipping lane, a highway of the sea. But unlike a highway on land, there are no lanes painted on the water. There are no streetlights. There is only the radar, the compass, and the eyes of the men on the bridge. The moon is not providing much light. The darkness out here is profound. It is a velvet sack pulled over the world. The only illumination comes from the ship itself, a small island of light moving through a universe of shadow. Maurice Farrell is drifting towards sleep. The air has cooled slightly, the oppressive heat of the port replaced by the fresh, salty breeze of the open ocean. He feels safe. Why shouldn't he? The ship is large. The sea is flat. The engines are steady. He does not know that the radio in the wheelhouse is silent. He does not know that on the bridge, the hierarchy of command has relaxed into complacency. He does not know that miles away, in the same channel, another shape is cutting through the water. This other shape is not a ferry. It is not carrying families or Christmas gifts. It is low, dark, and ugly. It is a tanker. It is carrying thousands of barrels of gasoline and other petroleum products. It is a floating bomb, sailing without a fuse, waiting for a spark. Its name is the Vector. The Doña Paz and the Vector are moving towards a singular point in space and time. It is a geometric inevitability, two lines intersecting on a graph. But for now, in these final hours of Act 1, there is no collision. There is only the grand ambition of the voyage, the belief that we can conquer the ocean with steel plates and diesel fuel, the belief that the system works. Maurice shifts on his hard bed. He hears the breathing of the man next to him. He hears the distant splash of the bow cutting the water. He hears the hum of the ventilation fans. He does not hear the scream yet. The silence of the sea is vast. It is ancient. It has swallowed ships for thousands of years, and it has never once offered an apology. Tonight, it is waiting. It is patient. It watches the Doña Paz sparkle like a trinket on its surface. The passengers are suspended in the dream of arrival. They are thinking of the pier in Tacloban or Catbalogan. They are thinking of the roast pig and the lechon that awaits them. They are thinking of the embrace of mothers and fathers. They are suspended in the gap between the promise and the reality. In the darkness of the bridge, a cigarette is lit. The flare of the match momentarily illuminates a face tired and bored. The smoke curls up, vanishing into the ventilation. The radar screen sweeps, a green line circling in the dark. Sweep, sweep, sweep. Does it show the danger? Or is the clutter of the sea hiding the approach? The Doña Paz sails on, a city of 3,000, 4,000 souls wrapped in metal, floating on a mile of water. Maurice Farrell sleeps, and in his sleep the sound of the ocean is a comfort. It is a hush. It is the sound of a mother quieting a child. Shh, shh. But the ear is a funny thing. Even in sleep it listens. It waits for the pattern to break. It waits for the rhythm to falter. The calmest seas often precede the most violent events. The lack of wind means the smoke will not disperse. The flat water means the oil will not break up. It will spread in a perfect cohesive sheet. The stage is being set not just for a disaster, but for a specific kind of hell. A hell where the floor is fire and the ceiling is night, and as the clock ticks past the midnight hour, moving from the comfort of the evening into the unpredictability of the early morning, the grand ambition of the Doña Paz, the simple human ambition to get home, is about to collide with the cold, hard physics of negligence. The musicians have taken their seats. The instruments are tuned. The choir is unwitting, asleep in the corridors, asleep on the decks, asleep in the tangled limbs of their loved ones. The conductor raises the baton. The silence holds for 1 second longer. Then, the world ends. But before the fire, there is the impact. And before the impact, there is the realization. That split second, where the eyes on the bridge widen, where the cigarette falls from the lip, where the hand reaches for a wheel that is too heavy to turn in time. That moment of recognition, that is where we leave the light. That is where we leave the world of logic and enter the world of the myth. The beast is awake, and it is hungry. Maurice Farrell wakes up, not to a scream but to a jolt, a shudder that runs through the steel bones of the ship, shaking the teeth in his head. The sound is coming. The other player in this tragedy is a vessel that should not have been there. If the Doña Paz was a tired, bloated queen, the Vector was a scavenger. It was a coastal tanker, small, low-slung, and ugly in the way that purely functional industrial machines are ugly. It was not designed for comfort. It was designed to move volatile liquid from one point to another. On the night of December 20th, the Vector is carrying a cargo that transforms it from a ship into a floating bomb. 8,000 barrels of petroleum products, gasoline, diesel, kerosene, the fluids of modern industry, highly flammable, sloshing in the tanks just beneath the steel deck. The Vector is a ghost ship. In a legal sense, it is operating without a license. Its paperwork is a fiction. The men on board are not properly certified for the specific dangers of their cargo. They are moving through the night with the casual indifference of men who have done this 100 times and survived. They are the variable that the Doña Paz did not account for. In the open ocean, right-of-way is determined by geometry and physics, but it is enforced by eyes. Someone has to be watching. On the bridge of the Vector, the vigilance is non-existent. The ship is pushing through the calm water, its bow cutting a phosphorescent wake. But the eyes that should be scanning the horizon are distracted or tired or simply absent. The sea is a place of illusion. Without radar, distance is impossible to judge in the dark. A light on the horizon could be a fishing boat a mile away, or a tanker 10 miles away, or it could be a star. But the Vector isn't just relying on eyes, it is relying on luck. We must understand the mechanics of this convergence. It is not sudden, it is a slow creeping inevitability. For hours the two vessels have been closing the distance. The Doña Paz heavy with humanity, chugging north. The Vector heavy with fuel, steaming south. They are moving on the same line. In a well-ordered world, the radios would crackle, captains would exchange pleasantries, agree on a port-to-port passing. They would shift their rudders a few degrees, widening the gap. But the airwaves are silent. The radio on the Doña Paz is broken or unmanned. The bridge of the Vector is a tomb of silence. The machine of maritime safety is composed of layers, technology, procedure, and human alertness. Tonight, every single layer has been stripped away. The technology is failing. The procedure is ignored. The humans are asleep or indifferent. The distance closes. 5 miles, 3 miles, 1 mile. At 1 mile, a ship is a massive presence. You can feel the displacement of the water. You can hear the thrum of the opposing engines. Yet on the Doña Paz, the party continues. The sleeping continues. The officers on the bridge, if they are there, do not alter course. Perhaps they believe the other ship will turn. Perhaps they believe they have the right of way. Perhaps they simply do not see it against the black backdrop of the sky. The Vector does not turn. It holds its line with the stubbornness of a dumb animal. And then time runs out. The physics of a maritime collision are different from a car crash. A car crash is over in milliseconds. A ship collision is a slow, grinding event. It involves momentum that cannot be stopped. Thousands of tons of steel moving at 12 or 15 knots possess a kinetic energy that is almost incalculable. When the Vector slams into the Doña Paz, it does not bounce off. It does not graze the side. It penetrates. The bow of the tanker, reinforced for ice or heavy seas, acts like a chisel. It strikes the Doña Paz on the port side, near the stern. It is a T-bone collision, the most deadly angle in naval architecture. The sound is the first thing that Maurice Farrell and the survivors will remember before the heat. It is the sound of the world breaking. Steel screams when it is torn. It is a high-pitched shriek vibrating through the hull, followed by the deep, resonant boom of structural failure. The Vector shears through the outer plating of the ferry. It crushes the bulkheads. It rips open the compartments where the third-class passengers are sleeping on their cots. But the violence of the impact is only the trigger. The true catastrophe happens in the chemistry. The Vector is carrying gasoline. As its bow crumples against the ferry's flank, its cargo tanks rupture. Thousands of gallons of fuel are instantly atomized. They spray into the air. They pour into the open wound of the Doña Pazes. They coat the twisting metal. And then metal meets metal. Friction creates heat, a spark. It takes only one spark. The explosion is not a gradual fire. It is a detonation. The vaporized gasoline ignites with a force that defies description. Witnesses on nearby islands miles away will later report seeing a flash that turned the night sky into noon. For the people inside the impact zone, there is no survival. They are gone in the blink of an eye, consumed by a wall of thermal energy that instantly vaporizes water and flesh. But for the thousands of others, further away in the bow or on the upper decks, the nightmare is just beginning. The lights go out. This is the moment the machine truly betrays its passengers. The electrical grid of the Doña Paz is severed by the impact and the explosion. The emergency generators, if they exist, do not kick in. Or perhaps they do for a second, before the fire consumes the wiring. Total darkness descends on the interior of the ship. Imagine the dormitory, hundreds of bunk beds crowded together, luggage blocking the aisles, families sleeping in tangled heaps. Suddenly the ship shudders violently, throwing people from their beds. The sound of the explosion deafens them. And then, the lights die. You wake up on the floor. You are bruised. You are disoriented. You cannot see your hand in front of your face. You hear the ship groaning, tilting, and then you hear the first screams. But more terrifying than the sound is the smell. It is the acrid chemical stench of burning petroleum. And the heat. The heat arrives before the flames. It rolls down the corridors like a physical wave, sucking the moisture out of the air. Panic is a contagion. In the pitch black it spreads faster than the fire. People scramble over one another. They claw at the walls. They shout names, mothers calling for children, husbands calling for wives. The carefully organized chaos of the boarding process dissolves into primal terror. Maurice Farrell is jolted from his sleep. He is one of the lucky ones. He is not in the impact zone. He is on a higher deck, but he knows instantly that the ship is dying. He tries to stand, but the deck is tilting. The Doña Paz is taking on water, but she is also taking on fire. The flames are not behaving like a normal structure fire. They are liquid. The burning gasoline from the Vector is pouring into the Doña Paz, flowing down stairwells, dripping through grates. The fire is running. It is chasing the passengers. The layout of the ship, confusing enough in the daylight with its narrow passages and dead ends, becomes a labyrinth of death in the dark. The smoke begins to fill the spaces. It is thick, black, oily smoke. One breath of it coats the throat in soot. 2 breaths, and you are choking. 3, and you are unconscious. Passengers rush for the exits. They find doors jammed by the warped steel of the hull. They find stairwells blocked by piles of luggage that have slid in the crash. They find life vest lockers that are padlocked. This detail haunts the narrative of the Doña Paz. The lockers. Survivors will later tell stories of desperate men smashing the wooden cabinets with their bare hands, trying to get to the cork vests inside, only to find them rotten or to find the cabinets empty. The safety equipment was a performance, a prop. Now that the play is real, the props are useless. The fire moves with an intelligence. It seeks oxygen. It roars through the ventilation shafts, bursting out into cabins far from the impact site. It creates a draft, a wind of its own making, sucking people toward the flames. Maurice fights his way to the railing. The scene on the deck is a vision of Hieronymus Bosch. Bodies are everywhere. Some are trampled, some are burned. People are praying, screaming, weeping. The railing is the only goal, to get to the edge, to get away from the furnace. He looks over the side. He expects to see the cool, dark safety of the ocean. He expects to jump into the water and swim away. But the machine has one final, cruel twist. The cargo of the Vector did not just burn inside the ships. It spilled. Thousands of barrels of oil and gasoline have poured out onto the surface of the sea. And because oil floats on water, the fire has followed it. The sea is on fire. This is the image that breaks the mind. The water, the universal symbol of extinguishing, has become the fuel. A circle of flames, hundreds of meters wide, surrounds the dying vessels. The fire on the water is not a flicker. It is a roaring blanket of blue and orange plasma, rising 10-20 feet into the air. The passengers trapped on the rail face an impossible choice. Behind them, the ship is a furnace, the metal plates glowing red-hot, the smoke suffocating them. In front of them, the ocean is a cauldron of burning oil. Jump or burn. It is a binary choice, but neither option offers survival. To stay is to die of smoke or heat. To jump is to dive into a pool of fire. Maurice stands at the rail. The heat is blistering his skin. The soles of his shoes are melting on the steel deck. He watches people jump. He sees them hit the water and disappear beneath the flames. He sees heads bob up, engulfed in fire, screaming before they sink again. The Doña Paz is listing heavily now. She is groaning, a deep metallic moan as her spine begins to twist. The collision has compromised her structural integrity. She is not going to last hours. She is going to last minutes. The chaos is absolute. There is no captain's voice on the loudspeaker giving orders. There are no crew members directing passengers to lifeboats. There are no lifeboats launching. The mechanisms of rescue have evaporated. It is every human animal for itself. Maurice looks down. He scans the water. He is looking for a break in the flames, a patch of black water. A miracle. He sees a spot, momentarily clear of the burning oil, pushed open by the falling debris or the churning of the sinking hull. He doesn't think. Thought is too slow. He acts. He climbs the rail. He pushes off. The fall is terrifyingly long. In the dark, you cannot judge the distance to the water. He tumbles through the smoke, the heat singeing his hair. He hits the water. It is not cool. It is warm, uncomfortably warm, heated by the inferno above. He goes under, the salt water filling his nose. He kicks, desperate to surface, desperate to breathe. But as he breaks the surface, gasping for air, he realizes the horror of his position. He is swimming in a soup of oil. It coats his eyes, his mouth, his skin. It tastes of poison. And the fire is closing in. The patch of clear water is shrinking. The gasoline spreads across the surface, bringing the wall of flame with it. He has to move, he has to swim, but where? Every direction looks the same: fire, smoke, debris. He begins to swim away from the ship, or what he thinks is away. He swims underwater as much as he can to avoid the heat, popping up only to snatch a breath of smoke-filled air. Above him, the Doña Paz is entering its final death throes. The ship is practically glowing now, illuminated from within by the fires raging in its belly. It looks like a lantern made of iron. And then, the noises begin to change. The mechanical screeching of the ship dying is overtaken by the human sound. This is the moment Maurice Farrell will never be able to exorcise from his brain. The chorus. Thousands of people are now in the water. Those who jumped, those who were thrown, those who slid off the tilting decks. They are thrashing in the burning oil. They are clinging to suitcases, to pieces of wood, to each other, and they are screaming. It is a scream of collective realization. They are calling out to God. Diosco, Diosco, Dios, my God, my God. The sound echoes off the water. It bounces between the burning hull of the ship and the low-hanging smoke. It creates a chamber of resonance. Maurice paddles. He finds a piece of debris, a floating crate perhaps, or a piece of a bench. He clings to it. He wipes the oil from his eyes and looks back. The vector is gone or indistinguishable from the fire. The Doña Paz is sliding backward. The stern is going under. The bow is rising into the air, pointing accusatorially at the indifferent stars. As the ship slips beneath the surface, a massive hiss rises, the sound of thousands of tons of hot metal meeting the cold depths. Steam explodes upwards, mixing with the smoke, and then the ship is gone. The grand ambition, the Christmas voyage, the vessel of state, it simply vanishes. All that is left is the fire on the water, and the heads, the thousands of heads bobbing in the orange glow. Act 2 ends not with silence, but with the crescendo of this chorus. The machine has failed. The reality has set in. The system that allowed the Vector to sail without a license. The system that allowed the Doña Paz to carry double her capacity. The system that ignored the broken radios and the locked life vests. That system has produced its inevitable result, a sea of fire. And a man named Maurice, drifting in the center of it, listening to the voices of the dying, knowing that he is alone in a way that no human being should ever be alone. The fire runs faster than people, but the memory runs fastest of all. The ocean at night is a place of absolute contradictions. For Maurice Farrell, treading water in the Table Strait, the world has split into two distinct hemispheres of torture. Above the waterline, the air is a blast furnace. The radiant heat from the burning slick scours his face, singeing his eyelashes, drying the salt on his skin into a tight, itchy mask. But below the neck, the water is a thief. It steals warmth with a slow, relentless patience. We often think of tropical seas as warm, like a bath, but the human body runs at 98.6 degrees. The sea, even in the Philippines, is cooler than that, and water conducts heat away from the body 25 times faster than air. Maurice is suspended in a medium that is slowly killing him by degrees, while the air above threatens to incinerate him. He clings to a piece of wood. It is slippery with oil. The bunker fuel is everywhere. It is a thick, viscous tar that clings to everything it touches. It gets in the ears, muffling the world. It gets in the nose, overpowering the smell of the sea with the smell of heavy industry. It gets in the mouth, a chemical bitterness that induces retching. But Maurice does not vomit. He does not move. He freezes, because the dominant sensation is no longer the heat or the cold or the oil. It is the sound. If you have ever been in a crowded stadium, you know the roar of 50,000 people. It is a jubilant, rhythmic noise. It has peaks and valleys, but the sound rising from the Table Strait is not rhythmic. It is a chaotic, discordant frequency of pure terror. It is the sound of the chorus. Maurice realizes with a sickening clarity that he is not alone. In the darkness, illuminated only by the flickering orange light of the burning fuel, there are hundreds, perhaps thousands of others. They are floating in life jackets that don't work, clinging to suitcases that are taking on water, holding onto the bodies of the dead to stay afloat. And they are screaming. The sound is not human. It loses its humanity when multiplied by this magnitude. It becomes a geological event. It creates a physical vibration in the water. Maurice can feel the screams against his chest, transmitted through the liquid medium. It is a wall of noise that obliterates thought. Panic feeds panic. The psychology of a crowd does not end when the crowd is dispersed into the water. If one person screams for help, the person next to them screams louder to be heard over the first. It escalates. It becomes a competition for survival, a desperate plea to a universe that seems to have turned its back. Maurice listens. He has no choice. There is no way to close your ears when your hands are gripping wet wood to keep from drowning. He hears the specific timbres of the agony, the deep, guttural shouts of men, the higher, frantic cries of women, and, most piercing of all, the sounds of children. The Doña Paz was a Christmas ship. It was full of children. This is the peak of the nightmare. This is the moment where the mind threatens to snap. To be a witness to a mass casualty event is one thing. To be immersed in it, to be bobbing in the same water, helpless to change it, is another. But then, something happens. Something worse than the noise. The dynamics of the event begin to shift. The fire, having consumed the initial burst of atomized gasoline, settles down. It drifts. The current pulls the patches of burning oil away from the main debris field. The light begins to fade, and the sound begins to change. It does not stop all at once. It thins. Imagine a choir of 4,000 voices. Now, imagine that every few seconds, a dozen voices drop out. They do not stop singing because the song is over. They stop because they can no longer keep their heads above the surface. Maurice listens as the wall of sound develops cracks. The seamless roar breaks down into individual cries. He can hear specific voices now. A man calling a name, over and over again, until the name becomes a gargle and then silence. A group praying the rosary, the rhythm of the Hail Mary broken by coughing, until the prayer stops mid-sentence. The silence claims them. It is a terrifying subtraction. The math of the sea is ruthless. Fatigue sets in. The cold works its way into the muscles, making them heavy. The water enters the lungs, and one by one, the swimmers slip beneath the black surface. The screaming dies down. It is replaced by a low moaning, a sound of collective exhaustion. And then, eventually, even that fades. Maurice Farrell is left in a silence that is heavier than the noise. It is a thick, oppressive silence, the kind of silence that rings in the ears. He is alone. He is not geographically alone. There are likely other survivors drifting in the dark, perhaps only 50 yards away. But the darkness erases proximity. Without sight, without sound, the distance between two people becomes infinite. He is a speck of consciousness in a void. He checks his own body. He is still moving. He is still breathing. The oil burns his eyes, but he can see the stars now. The smoke has cleared enough to reveal the indifference of the cosmos. The Southern Cross hangs in the sky, bright and sharp, looking down on the oil slick, just as it looked down on the calm water hours before. The passage of time in the water is distorted. There are no clocks. There are no landmarks. There is only the rhythmic slapping of small waves against his makeshift raft. Minutes stretch into hours. Hours feel like days. Maurice waits for the rescue. He assumes, with the logic of a civilized man, that help is on the way. A collision of this magnitude, an explosion that lit up the horizon. Surely the radio waves are buzzing. Surely the helicopters are spinning up on the tarmac in Manila. Surely the grey hulls of the Philippine Navy are cutting through the water at full speed. He scans the horizon, looking for the sweep of a searchlight. He listens for the thwap, thwap, thwap of rotors. But the horizon is dark. The air is silent. This is the great betrayal of the Doña Paz. The silence of the aftermath is matched only by the silence of the authorities. The Doña Paz had no radio contact when it sank. The Vector had no lookout to send a distress call. The maritime authorities on land are asleep. It is 3:00 a.m. It is 4:00 a.m. The shift change at the Coast Guard station happens quietly. No one notices that a dot has disappeared from the map because the dot was never being tracked. There is no SOS. There is no Mayday. The disaster has happened in a vacuum. 4,000 people have gone into the water, and the world does not know. Maurice drifts. The physical reality of his situation begins to deteriorate. Thirst becomes a torture. It is a cruel irony of the ocean, surrounded by water yet dying of thirst. The salt water on his lips tempts him, but he knows that to drink it is madness. The oil fumes make him lightheaded. Hypothermia is subtle in the tropics. It doesn't arrive with violent shivering. It arrives with a slow stupor. The mind begins to unspool. Maurice's thoughts fragment. He thinks of his family. He thinks of the ticket he bought. He thinks of the bed he was sleeping in. Was it real? Is this real? The trauma of the event tries to reject the reality. Perhaps he is still asleep. Perhaps this is a nightmare born of a heavy meal and a stuffy cabin. But the sting of the oil is real. The pain in his arms gripping the wood is real. He begins to hallucinate. Shapes in the darkness. Is that a boat? Is that a light? He splashes towards it, wasting precious energy, only to find it is a reflection of a star on a patch of slime. The fear of predators enters his mind. The Tabla Strait is deep water. It is home to sharks. Sharks are attracted to vibration, to thrashing, to blood. The silence that terrified him earlier now becomes a shield. He tries to be quiet. He tries to be small. He tucks his legs up, making himself a smaller target for whatever might be swimming beneath him. He floats in a state of suspended animation, a piece of debris among the debris. He is not a man anymore. He is a statistic waiting to be counted, or lost. The sky begins to change. The charcoal black turns to a bruised purple, then a slate grey. Dawn is coming. The sun, the great revealer, is climbing up the other side of the world. Maurice dreads the light. In the dark, he can imagine that others are safe. He can imagine that the lifeboat's launched, that the crowd is huddled on rafts just out of sight. The darkness allows for hope. The light brings the truth. As the sun breaks the horizon, painting the sky in soft pinks and oranges, colors that mock the violence of the night, Maurice looks around. The sea is calm again. It is disturbingly flat. And it is empty. There is no fleet of lifeboats. There are no clusters of rafts. There is only a vast, shimmering slick of oil stretching for miles. It creates a rainbow sheen on the water, beautiful and toxic. And amidst the oil, the debris. Suitcases, slippers, plastic bags, crates of apples bobbing like strange buoys. And bodies. The dead are returning to the surface, or they are drifting, held up by their life vests if they found them, or by the trapped air in their clothes. They are everywhere. They are the population of the floating city, now citizens of the current. But the living? Maurice strains his eyes. He spins in the water. He sees a head. Then another. Far away, a small group clinging to a piece of wreckage. That's it. Out of thousands, out of a city, a handful. The scale of the loss is instantly, visually apparent. It is a genocide by negligence. The emptiness of the water hits him harder than the fire did. Where are they? Where is everyone? The sea has swallowed them. Hours pass under the rising sun. The heat returns, vicious and immediate. The oil on his skin begins to bake. Finally, a sound, a real sound. Not the phantom noise of the night. An engine. It is not a Coast Guard cutter. It is not a Navy frigate. It is another passing merchant vessel, the Don Sulpicio, ironically another ship from the same company line, or perhaps a different inter-island vessel. Accounts vary in the chaos of memory. But a ship appears. It slows. It has seen the debris field. It has seen the oil. The rescue is not cinematic. It is clumsy and desperate. Crew members on the rescue ship throw nets and ropes over the side. They look down at the water with faces of horror. They are seeing the aftermath of a war zone. Maurice swims. He summons the last reserves of energy from his cells. He grabs a rope. His hands are slippery with oil, his grip failing. He wraps the rough hemp around his arm. He is hauled up the side of the steel hull. He flops onto the deck. The metal is hard and hot. He coughs, expelling seawater and bile. He looks up at the faces of the crew. They are counting. 1, 2, 3. They keep looking at the water. They are waiting for the rest. They are waiting for the thousands. They wait and they wait. Other survivors are pulled up. A young boy, a soldier, a few others. They are covered in black slime, their eyes white and wide, looking like creatures from another planet. The crew of the rescue ship keeps scanning. They use binoculars. They shout into radios. But the count slows. It stalls. It stops. 24, 26. The numbers fluctuate in the initial reports, but they never reach 3 digits. Maurice Farrell lies on the deck, shivering violently under the tropical sun. He hears the crew talking. He hears the confusion in their voices. Where are the rest? There must be more. Check the radar. There is nothing on the radar. Maurice closes his eyes. He knows the answer. He heard the answer. He heard the choir sing its final note. The rescue is over. The Doña Paz is gone. The vector is gone. And in the silence of the morning, the magnitude of the lie begins to take shape. The manifest said 1-500. The survivors know there were 400. The world is about to wake up to a math problem that cannot be solved. Maurice is alive. But as the rescue ship turns its bow toward Manila, cutting through the same calm water that betrayed them all, he carries a sound in his head that will never be drowned out by the engine. He has survived the fire. Now, he must survive the memory. The morning after the end of the world is always quiet. It is a bureaucratic quiet. The fire is out. The oil has dispersed, thinning into a rainbow sheen that stretches toward the horizon. The screams have stopped. Now the silence is filled by the scratching of pens on paper. When the rescue ships dock, when the few dozen survivors are brought ashore, shivering, coated in black sludge, eyes wide with the 1,000-yard stare of the trenches, the first instinct of the civilized world is to count. We believe in numbers. We believe that if we can tally the dead, we can contain the tragedy. We can file it, we can understand it. But the Doña Paz refuses to be counted. The officials open the manifest. It is a clean, typed list. 1,518 names. It is a legal document. In the eyes of the law, these are the people who were on the ship. These are the souls who matter. But as the days pass and the news spreads through the archipelago, a different kind of list begins to form. It does not form in shipping offices or courtrooms. It forms in the living rooms of Tacloban, in the barangays of Samar, in the crowded tenements of Manila. Families wait. They wait for the door to open. They wait for the phone to ring. They wait for the pasalubong, the Christmas gifts that were promised. The father who was bringing home a bicycle. The sister who was bringing home money for tuition. The grandmother who was coming to hold her newest grandchild. They do not come. The families go to the offices of Sulpicio Laines. They scan the posted manifest. They run their fingers down the typed columns, looking for the familiar shape of a name, and they do not find it. "He was on the boat," a mother says, clutching a photograph. "I bought his ticket myself. I saw him walk up the plank." "I'm sorry," the official says, pointing to the paper. "He is not on the list. If he is not on the list, he was not on the ship." This is the second tragedy of the Doña Paz. The first was the fire that consumed the bodies. The second is the paperwork that erased the lives. The ghosts of the ferry begin to emerge. The children who boarded for free. The students who bought half-price tickets that were never recorded. The desperate travelers who slipped a few hundred pesos to a deckhand to squeeze on board. The overcrowding wasn't just a safety violation. It was an act of administrative erasure. Historians and investigators will later do the math that the shipping line refused to do. They will look at the capacity of the Doña Paz. They will look at the crowd density described by survivors like Maurice Farrell. And they will come to a terrifying conclusion. There were not 1,500 people on board. There were likely 4,386. Nearly 3,000 people simply did not exist. They died in the strait, and the system denied they had ever lived. They became unpeople. Their deaths were not just unrecorded, they were unauthorized. To die without a ticket is to die without a claim. It is to be swept away twice, once by the ocean and once by the ledger. As the weeks turn into months, the investigation begins. It is a slow grinding process, devoid of the heat and terror of the night itself. Men in suits sit in air-conditioned rooms and debate the physics of collision. They look at charts. They look at maintenance logs. They dissect the vector. The small tanker that delivered the fatal blow is revealed to be a phantom in its own right. The vector was operating without a license. Its certificate of inspection had expired. The men on the bridge were not qualified to pilot a vessel carrying hazardous materials. It was a rogue element, a floating bomb sailing through international shipping lanes with the casual negligence of a Sunday driver. And the Doña Paz. The investigators peel back the layers of the Grande Dame. They find a history of shortcuts, the radio that didn't work, the life jackets that were locked away to prevent theft, prioritizing the cost of cork and canvas over the value of human life, the lack of fire drills, the structural modifications that increased capacity but decreased stability. It becomes clear that the collision was not an accident. An accident implies an unpredictable event. This was a scheduled appointment. It was the inevitable result of two systems, the shipping industry and the petroleum industry, operating with zero margin for error and zero regard for the consequences. The blame is diluted. It is spread thin like the oil on the water. Sulpicio Laines blames the vector for being unseaworthy. The owners of the vector blame the Doña Paz for not keeping a lookout. The Coast Guard is blamed for not inspecting the ships. The Port Authority is blamed for allowing the overcrowding. When everyone is responsible, no one is responsible. The legal battles drag on for years, decades. The families of the victims, the ones who can prove their loved ones were on board, are offered settlements. The amounts are insulting. A few $1,000s for a life, the price of a used car for the loss of a father, the price of a television for the loss of a child. And for the families of the unmanifested, the ghosts, they get nothing. They cannot prove the death occurred. They are left with empty rooms and a silence that screams louder than any lawsuit. The beast that Maurice Farrell sensed in the water was not a shark. It was the corporation. It was the cold, unfeeling logic of profit margins that calculated the risk of a disaster and decided it was an acceptable cost of doing business. But what of Maurice? Survival is not a victory, it is a sentence. Maurice Farrell returns to the land of the living, but he does not return whole. He carries the tabla straight inside him. Post-traumatic stress disorder is a clinical term. It suggests a disorder, a malfunction of the brain. But for Maurice, his reaction is not a malfunction. It is a perfect recording. His brain has etched the sound of 4,000 people dying into the deepest grooves of his memory. He tries to live a normal life. He walks the streets of Manila. He eats. He works. But the sound is always there, waiting in the ambient noise of the world. A tea kettle whistles in the next room, and suddenly he is back in the water. The screech of a bus braking on asphalt sounds like steel tearing. The roar of a crowd at a basketball game is no longer a sound of joy. It is the chorus. He develops a complex relationship with silence. He craves it, because the noise of the world is too much. But he fears it because in the absolute silence, the memory becomes audible. When it is quiet, he can hear the individual voices again. He can hear the splashing. He can hear the crackle of the fire. He becomes a witness. He speaks to journalists. He speaks to documentaries. He tells his story not because he wants to relive it, but because he has to validate the dead. He has to be the voice for the unmanifested. If he stops talking, the 3,000 ghosts disappear completely. He describes the heat. He describes the oil. But mostly, he describes the screaming. He wants the world to hear what he heard. He wants the world to understand that the statistic, 4,386, is not a number. It is a scream that lasted for hours. And how does the Philippines remember? The sea forgets nothing, but people forget everything. We are a species with a short memory for pain. We build memorials, stone markers with bronze plaques, and we think that is enough. We lay wreaths on the anniversary. We say, never again. But go to the piers of Manila today. Go to the port of Cebu. Watch the ferries loading in the evening light. The ships are newer now. They have radar. They have GPS. The officers wear crisp uniforms. There are safety videos playing on the flat-screen TVs in the passenger lounge. But look closer. Look at the cargo stacked in the hallways. Look at the sheer density of the crowd. Look at the ticket inspectors waving people through with a hurried glance. The pressure is still there. The economic gravity that pulled the Doña Paz into the deep is still active. People still need to get home. Tickets are still expensive. The extras still bored. We have modernized the machine, but we have not changed its nature. The maritime industry in the developing world runs on thin margins. Safety is expensive. Redundancy is expensive. Leaving a paying passenger on the dock is a loss of revenue. The Doña Paz is not just a shipwreck. It is a blueprint. It is a warning that we continue to ignore. Every time a ferry sinks in Indonesia, in Bangladesh, in the Philippines, and they do sink with terrifying regularity, we see the same headlines: overcrowding, unlisted passengers, safety equipment failure. It is the echo of 1987. The scream has not stopped. It has just traveled through time. The site of the disaster, the Tabla Strait, looks like any other patch of ocean today. The water is blue. The waves are gentle. The fish swim through the currents. There is no marker on the water. No buoy says, "Here lies a city." If you were to sail over the wreck today, your depth sounder might ping off the hull. The Doña Paz rests at a depth of over 500 meters. She is sitting upright, according to some sonar scans, a steel tomb in the crushing dark. Inside her hull, the skeletons of the unmanifested remain. They are the permanent passengers. They are the ones who never made it to Christmas. They are preserved in the cold, anaerobic deep, waiting for a justice that will never come down to them. Maurice Farrell is an old man now, or perhaps he has passed on, joining the chorus in a different way. But the story he carried is immortal. It is a story about the fragility of our systems. We build ships of steel, we write laws of paper, and we convince ourselves that we are safe. We convince ourselves that the ground is solid and the captain is awake. But the Doña Paz teaches us that the system is a facade. It is held together by luck and assumption, and when the luck runs out, when the assumption fails, the reality is waiting. The reality is fire on water. As we reach the end of this documentary, as the image of the burning sea fades from your mind, do not listen to the silence that follows. Listen closely. Lean in. Can you hear it? It is the sound of the world moving on. It is the sound of engines starting up at the North Harbour. It is the sound of tickets being stamped. It is the sound of footsteps on a gangplank. The machine is still running. The ferry is leaving the port. The night is dark and the sea is calm. And somewhere, in the distance, another ship is moving through the black water. Its lights dim, its radio silent. The scream is history, but the silence is the future.